All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover here in the next little bit. So, my name is Greg DeVore. I'm one of the co-founders of ScreenSteps. Trevor, my brother and co-founder, is on the call as well. And then John will be moderating here, our director of marketing. If you have any questions while we're going along, stick them in the chat or use the QA, and or John will make sure that we get them answered. We'll stay around afterwards as long as you need to dive into any questions you have. But we're going to be talking about why your AI strategy needs better operational knowledge. So let's tee this up a little bit and be clear that AI can mean a lot of things. AI always requires good data, but in the context of this call, we're going to be talking about customer and employee support. So how are you helping people get answers to their questions? How do they know what to do? That's the type of AI implementation we're talking about. Uh, in here. So I want to be clear on that from the get-go. Okay, so here's what we have heard. A lot of AI platforms are selling a Tesla without a charging station. What does that mean? AI, for any AI to work, it has to have reliable data. And when you get into using AI inside of your organization, a lot of that data that it needs, so that the operational information that you need is stuck in people's heads. And so they'll come in and say, hey, give us your SharePoint or your documentation, your PDFs, and feed that in to our system. And they don't get the results they want. Now, it's not the problem of the AI tool, right? It's just that you don't have that charging station, you don't have that fuel that AI needs. Um, we have yet to talk to someone who had their data ready for AI. And so a lot of the AI implementations will show you an overview of what this looks like are struggling because of this bottleneck right here. And the result is then, you spend a lot of money on a product, but you're not able to launch it to really get the results that you want. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to do an overview of how AI for customer and employee support works, what's typically the implementation approach, where organizations run into problems. Trevor will talk about examples of several AI platforms and some things that they do well and some that they don't. And then we'll talk at the end about how knowledge operations can help and really prepare your organization to put a system in place that's going to really help you get the most out of these tools. So first, let's zero in on what we're talking about here. We're talking about operational knowledge. We're not talking about generalized knowledge. So if I want stuff on business acumen or industry knowledge, I don't need a specialized AI tool. I mean, ChatGPT can give me a lot of that information because that's generalized knowledge that everybody has access to. What ChatGPT or other AI tools don't have is access to the operational knowledge in your organization. And that's where it's even beyond our policies and procedures. It's what do I say here? Where do I click here? What decision do I make here? It's the actionable information that people need to solve problems, to complete tasks, and to answer questions. And the problem is it's very specific to your organization. Your operational knowledge is going to be totally unique. It's sometimes even unique among teams in your organization. And so, unless you have a way to get that out of people's heads in a way that AI can use it, you're going to struggle. Now, when we talk about this, a lot of times you'll approach this from a knowledge management standpoint. And knowledge management really takes this idea of like, we're going to collect all this knowledge, we're going to have it all nicely organized into folders, and it's all got the same formatting. But knowledge management doesn't always focus on how are people going to use this. Knowledge ops, we focus on enabling a performance, and that's going to be important as we talk here because we're designing the content so somebody can use it. Well, what happens when we feed AI knowledge that is designed so people can use it? We're going to get much better results. You'll see that here in a second. Okay, let's talk about how a typical implementation will work. And Trevor, I always forget what RAG stands for. Can you remind me there of what RAG stands for?
The the RAG, oh, so retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah.
and
Okay. So
is
I don't know
rag's much
why.
easier. Just say rag.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't remember that phrase. But
I don't know.
so
It's so easy.
typical project will come in. You're going to gather documentation because, like we said, AI needs to have information to run it. And that's going to get imported into a data lake. It might be a vector database. It's going to be some sort of place where you can gather all of that information. They will then take, and most often they're not training a model. You have a base large language learning model or large language model that they're going to augment with RAG. And what RAG does is it will take when somebody puts a query in, like, how do I do this? Or what do I do in this situation? It's using that model, but it's going to augment it with information from this data lake that they search in the moment and pull in to generate the response. And this is what's really important is that all your operational data is going to be in this area that they're querying. So you have that base model of whatever the LLM model is that is highly trained. And these are changing so fast that you want to have access to updated ones as they come out, but then you've got to somehow feed it this extra. So this model is, I've got a core model here, and then at the moment, I'm going to go out and search for relevant information, ingest that, and understand it so I can formulate it into a response to the person who's asking the question. So once they do that, they gather documentation, they bring in the data lake, they start, running tests with this. They're going to test and refine it, and they get to this part and they're not getting the results. And I think we've all seen this. There's times that AI can do just amazing things. It does a great demo, and sometimes when you get into the details, it gets a little complicated. So then they typically go back and say, well, wait a minute. The reason we're not getting the results we want is because we don't have the documentation that we need. And I think the mistake that's been made a lot in implementations is when you get into operational knowledge, you're not dealing with knowledge that is static. So, like a lot of AI has been trained on historical data. And so you can treat that like a project. I gather the historical data, I dump it in, AI can analyze it, and I can now use it and query it. But operational knowledge is changing all the time. So you can't really treat this like a project. It's not like you document all your rules, you dump it in, and AI is going to be good. This is going to be changing. And so you need a way to refresh this data lake with new information, updated information, so that your tests get much better. And that's really where a knowledge operation system can come in. A knowledge operations platform is going to ensure that you have accurate information, that you have up to date, and you're able to respond very quickly. And these systems can then feed AI tools so that you're getting high quality responses there. So this gives you kind of an overview and put in any questions if you have about how this typical process. This is very high level, but it's gather documentation, put it in a place where AI can access it, have the set up the RAG interface there to pull that in and then test and refine the results. So if we really want this to work well, like I said, we can't treat it as a project. We have to have a system that's going to identify knowledge gaps, capture knowledge from your subject matter experts, refine and approve that knowledge, and then review that knowledge and certify it regularly. Because if you have outdated information that's feeding your AI is going to give outdated results to the people using it, whether it's customers or employees. And this capturing knowledge from SMEs is so crucial because if you just expect everybody to sit down and type out documentation for everything, it just doesn't happen. I mean, it becomes a huge project. I can share with you a couple. I was talking with someone just last week. They bought, one of these big customer service AI platforms, very expensive platform, and they can't launch it to their customers or their employees because they don't have all the documentation. So they're going through this whole process right now of trying to capture all of the information that they need to get the results that they want out of the product they're using. Um, and a lot of times these companies will come to you and they're saying, look, will you just give us your junk drawer of knowledge and we'll make it work? And that's kind of the salesperson talking. The junk drawer of knowledge strategy doesn't work. If you just throw your SharePoint site at it that has outdated and incomplete documentation on it, AI is not just going to figure it out. It's not going to work that way.
Hey,
Okay.
Greg, we had a question come in that you might get to in a bit, so I'll put it out there and feel free to say that's coming.
Yeah.
But they asked, how should we expect AI to handle workflow articles?
So workflow articles, yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. I could give you a quick thing here though, but we're building APIs so that the workflow articles can be translated into a way that AI can consume it. The best AI systems will provide a link back to the source. And so a workflow article, for those of you who don't understand, I'll show you an example at the end, but it's basically like a decision tree. And what you can do is if you've got the right system, it will give a summary, but then it'll have a link back to the workflow article that the person can bring up and follow through because that will be faster than them trying to just read text that the AI prompt might generate. So there's two parts of that. How does it feed the right information to the AI system so it's indexed and it understands it? But also, does the AI system point them to something that's going to be more visual when it's generating the response?
And Greg, I would also say I don't think you want AI changing that workflow article.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Because a workflow article, when is written so that all the steps are correct and they should be as succinct as possible already, right? And you're getting that guide. And so if AI is summarizing that, or you can run into problems with it missing some steps or slightly modifying something which you don't want.
Yeah, when we work with customers who looked at AI platforms, when they look at it, like the workflow article format, and let me just give you an example, we're talking about this on here. Um, I'll show you a quick example. So workflow format is something like this. Now, think about if it'll guide me through, it tells me what to say. If this was all presented in a chat bot just with text, it's going to be much harder to follow on the way through. So your AI can use this to inform it, but ultimately you want to link back to it. And most of the systems will do that. All right, Trevor, you've looked a lot into these, and built integrations with some of them. Talk to us a little bit about what these platforms need to have if they're going to what types of APIs and those sort of things they need to have in place so that you can have accurate operational knowledge.
Yeah. So first, we want to define. So when we're looking at an AI platform, right, and then we're thinking about and remember, we're talking within the context of procedural knowledge, right? Things that you're doing within your company on a day-to-day basis, and they're going to be tasks which are changing or policies which are changing. And so the most important thing for any AI platform that we choose in our company is that it can be fed up-to-date data when that at the moment of change, so that when a policy changes or a workflow changes, what have you, in our system, AI is being alerted to that. Now, even after the AI is notified about that change, that can even take some time for it to fully index it and make it available within the answers that it gives. So it's really important that we're able to so let's say that we're working with ScreenSteps and that's our knowledge repository. Then maybe I'm using Glean is an integration which we built, which Glean.com is a service that they're the best one that I've come across as far as just how like thoroughly they've thought through the problem. They are excellent with permissions um, and just they realized early on that it was so important that third party that the AI engine is only as good as the data it has, and so it's really important that they have powerful ways of getting data into it. So Glean.com, they call it Work AI for All, is kind of their platform. But what they offer is that let's say I'm using Glean as my AI platform, as my that's all my bots are going to be created using Glean. What's important is that if I'm bringing a third party source, now, like Greg said, if an AI company comes to you and says, "Hey, give me all your PDFs and all your Word documents and all this static content, and then I'll fill the AI with that," that's a red flag, unless you're dealing with historical data, because unless you are routinely updating all those PDFs and you have a way for it at the moment of change when you update that PDF that it then gets ingested into the AI, that information is going to be out of date pretty quickly.
Well, Trevor, is
So
it safe to say it? The AI needs to be able to both learn and forget. This is
yeah,
crucial. You've got to be
and
able
so
to
that's
remove stuff from the knowledge.
yeah, and so we call this initial learning the bulk indexing stage, right? Where we just like, all right, let's get all the data that we have, get it into the AI, and that's that first learning that happens, and that's just a bulk process. But then there's that updating at time of change, whereas okay, I changed this policy, so we need to go in, erase the policy that AI knew about, and or refresh it, if you will. And you can think of it however, whatever works for you. But we want to get the new policy into the AI system. We don't want it using the old policy at all. And so there has to be a way for the AI system like Glean to say, oh yeah, I have that document in my memory. Oh, you want to change that document out? Great. We'll remove the current version of that document. We'll replace it with the new one. And then AI is using up-to-date data to answer questions. So that's the first red flag, right? Is if somebody's just saying, let's just work off of PDFs and Word files. Greg, from our experience, and we've done coaching at ScreenSteps. At ScreenSteps, we've done a lot of coaching, and it's very rare that if somebody has a SharePoint repository or a collection of Word documents, that information is accurate. So there's some data hygiene that has to happen there. So,
Well, and Trevor, let me just kind of emphasize here. A lot of them are saying, like, give us your SharePoint. And then when they're saying that, what that means is they're going to index it every so often. They're going to run a full index on that. Is that right, Trevor? That they're just going to have to re-index it for updates because it's not doing stuff in real time.
yeah, that not that I've seen when you're dealing with SharePoint. Now, technically, you could create a SharePoint integration that, like, when files were updated, yeah, it would have to create. It would be a more robust one than what I've seen. But it's possible for a company to do that, like say, oh, this file was updated, let's send it out. Right, that is possible. That's not typically what people are doing. They're saying, let's dump all our stuff and then we're going to do a mass import again. Let's bring everything in again. Let's just start over. Whereas these, like if you're looking at like Intercom customer support platform, they have been making a big push into AI with their Fin AI agent for both your customer support as well as customers. And so originally when they created their APIs, they could say, oh, we'll ingest your website or upload some documents. Now they've released an API that a company like ScreenSteps can use to push updates in real time to that platform. And that was we actually tried to build an integration with them early on when they were in their beta stage, but you could get documents in, but they made it very difficult then to keep pushing updates into the system. Now that their API is actually fully released, that is possible. So we'll be looking at some other options there. If you look at Zendesk, with their Einstein AI, they have their Salesforce has some.
Salesforce. That's Salesforce, right?
Oh, sorry, I was saying Salesforce. I was looking at the Salesforce connector or Zendesk connector for Salesforce. And so Salesforce has Einstein, and what they did, like I think starting around last April or so, they have Salesforce has Data Cloud, which is how you bring all your data into Salesforce and you can use it in different ways. Their integration guides now, like they've just started pushing out beta connector after beta connector after beta connector. I mean, I'm counting like, I don't know, there may be over 100 here, because they realize that it's so important to be able to get data in and keep it fresh from all these different systems so that the AI can be giving relevant answers.
Yeah, and a question just came up in the chat. Like, isn't this part of the training process? I think training is the wrong mindset to use if you really want to understand how AI is working in here. It's not that there is some training that's going on, but it's giving it access to current and accurate information. And so when these companies started like Intercom and Salesforce, when they first kind of rolled this out, it was just give us a dump of your data, but there was no provision in there about how we're going to deal with this data when it changes. And so it was just like, okay, if we changes it all, we just got to dump it all back in again. So every time you'd make a little change, you had to do the whole thing. Like what Trevor was saying, Glean early on had APIs so that you could expire just parts of data. You could say, hey, this article, remove it from your memory, or this article, update it. And so it could have accurate information. Now you're seeing these other platforms are starting to get that, like what Trevor's saying. Intercom now has the APIs for that, and Salesforce is starting to build these connectors that allow that to happen because they're recognizing these AI initiatives were failing, to not totally failing, but failing to reach their full potential because they didn't have a way to refresh knowledge that it needed. It's not like the AI gets to
Yeah,
a point that it knows your business and it knows what's happening on like in your meetings and or software is updating all that sort of stuff that it just magically knows that. It has to be fed that information.
yeah. And one thing to keep in mind is that training, when Greg talked about RAG, right, where training an AI model, that happens before you start using it. So if a company comes to you and says, we're sending it, we are going to sell you and you can start using our AI chatbot, they have a model that's already been trained on some generic data. Actually going in and training an AI model is a very expensive and time consuming process. What's happening here is that, like Greg said initially early on, is that you're taking this highly trained model like ChatGPT or whoever it is you're using, and then you're giving it access to this data lake that's your company's data. It's unique to your company. And then there's logic, which uses the trained AI model to analyze your data lake, your data repository, and answer questions using what data that's unique to you, which it's technically different than that initial training process that goes on. So that's why we have to make sure that that data lake is always has accurate information in it, because that's the only thing that AI has to make to answer your questions that you're asking, that your employees are asking.
Well, Trevor, I was going to go on and then talk a little bit about how Knowledge Ops platform can help here. Anything else that you want to add before I do that?
No, that's fine.
So
Hey,
if you're
Greg,
in, oh,
just
sorry. Yeah.
yeah, just before we move on, we had a question come in the Q&A and back to Salesforce Einstein. So does ScreenSteps integrate with Einstein and Data Cloud? Is there a native integration?
Not
No,
yet. So,
we don't
you,
have one
Trevor,
right
do you
now.
want to talk about that?
Yeah, just we don't have an integration with them right yet. Early on, when we originally looked at it, the way that their integrations worked were, hey, dump all your files into a zip and and upload it. And now as they've started to build out the connectors, it's something we'll definitely look into. Um, so
Basically, the only integration we built at first was with Glean because it had a way to expire knowledge and a way to respect permissions. And these other systems didn't. It was like, just give us everything and then give us everything again. And that wasn't a sustainable strategy. So Glean was the first one that we've done. Now that they're having more APIs are coming out that are like Glean's, we'll be building more integrations with those platforms.
Awesome. And then just to level set, we had another question come in. When you say data lake, does that include knowledge bases?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can point at a knowledge base there. But there's one thing. So pointing at a knowledge base can be the same as pointing at a web page. It depends on, is that knowledge base connected in a way that when updates are made to the knowledge base, it's automatically updating and expiring things in the thing it's connected to, the AI tool it's connected to. Because you could say, oh, they'll say point it to your knowledge base, but it's still just doing that all or nothing thing. It's just going to dump everything and then maybe there's a certain cadence at which they're re-indexing everything. It's kind of like Google re-indexing your whole site again there. So it's
yeah,
you got to kind of get into the details of what they're doing.
and I would just say, just conceptually, so when we say data lake, this is just this. It's this. You can think of it as a database where people are just putting all the information that they want the AI to be able to analyze to give answers. And when you think of a data lake, you want to make sure it's like a nice clear mountain lake and not a swamp. Because if you put a bunch of garbage in there, then you're going to get bad answers. And if you put a lot of really high quality content into that lake, then you'll get clear answers.
I have not talked to a single AI implementer yet that has said that when they go to a customer that the data is ready. They said it's the biggest problem they're running into is that companies do not have the data in a way that the AI can use it to get the results that they need. And that's what Trevor's talking about, the swampy lake, the murky lake. And so what we want to do is create a crystal clear one. So let me just take a moment here and talk about how can a knowledge ops platform help this? Because this AI is really creating the need for a knowledge operations platform. You need now a system, like I said, that's going to help you identify the gaps, capture the knowledge, review and update it, or review and publish it, and then regularly certify it, make sure it's accurate there. So we have three challenges here. We've got to capture information, we've got to review it, and we've got to maintain it. Then these things have to happen if we're in a feed that AI engine that's trying to work for us. So there's a couple of things that a knowledge ops platform and find and follow can really help with here. First, the idea, if you're not familiar with find and follow, it involves separating out foundational and actionable knowledge. Well, what happens here? When we do this, it's not that first we make it clearer for AI to follow when we separate those two things out, but we're also making it much easier for us to review and maintain. So when we have foundational, that's the what, the why, the when, all that sort of stuff. And we have the actual, which is the how. If you have content reviewers and you mix all that together, that becomes very mentally straining to figure out, is this still accurate or not? When you separate that out, these are kind of the rules of the process. This is the step-by-step guide of the process. It's very easy, like this sort of stuff here, the foundational, the what behind it, it doesn't change that often. You're not going to have to update that nearly as much. The actionable, the recipe is going to change a lot. And so you're going to have to update that quite a bit. But it's when in this format, it's much easier for the SMEs to review it and say, that's accurate or that's not. So you're really creating, it's not even so much that you're preparing it better for AI ingestion, you're making it easier for your people to maintain this content and make sure the right content is getting into the AI engine there. So if you want to learn more about that, we've got a lot of stuff on how do you separate foundational and actionable information. It makes a huge difference in your review and maintenance. Obviously, if you've seen the knowledge ops maturity model before, if you're operating at this guide stage, you're going to be in a very good place to take advantage of AI. If you are operating the document or the tribal stage, and the vast majority of companies I speak to they rate themselves as a 1.5, so right between tribal and document. If the information's stuck in people's heads, you're not ready. In fact, we were just talking with a partner this week. They're coming to us. They're like, we have clients that want to adopt these AI tools, and we're telling them they're not ready. They're not ready. Too much is they're still functioning as a tribal organization, tribal knowledge organization, and they're not ready to do this. So one of the key things the knowledge ops platform can do is get that information out of people's heads. And this is primarily what we're doing with companies right now is we can use AI to talk to those SMEs. We can record it on a Zoom meeting. They can do it themselves in the software, and you get a list of questions that they need to answer, and they can go and they talk through it, and it will create those actionable outlines. It'll create foundational outlines. And this, like 10x is the speed at which you can get information out of people's heads without them having to put their hands on a keyboard and type. And this is a game changer for getting this information ready for an AI system and keeping it up to date there. So it'll take out, it doesn't just transcribe it, it turns it into these actionable outlines. This is very much easier to review than something like this to say, hey, is this accurate or is it not? And then you can also convert that into these knowledge or workflow articles or decision trees. Once again, if you've got a very complex procedure, this is going to be a better presentation. The AI can link to this and say, this is where I got the information from. Here's the guide, bring it up. And the employee can go through this. This is going to help them be more consistent and independent there. All right, so we're at the half hour. We're happy to stay around and answer any questions that you have about any of this, how knowledge operations will tie into this, or how you can use the knowledge operations platform like ScreenSteps to get information out of people, or even how these different AI systems work. But if in the meantime, while you're thinking of questions, if you'd like a demo or a trial of ScreenSteps, or you want to dive into knowledge ops and what it is, we've got a free course on that. And you've also got the book Find and Follow that you can take advantage of.
Awesome. Well, Greg, we got a couple questions. And before I ask them, I'm just going to say one thing. Earlier this week, you posted a great blog on the ScreenSteps website that really goes into detail on everything you just covered. So while you're answering these questions, I'm going to post that in the chat. So the first question here from Michelle is the recording option in ScreenSteps now?
Yes, it's available on our enterprise plans. So if you want to reach out to us and talk about it and what that looks like, we have we had one group that their goal was to get 70 procedures around digital banking done in I think a month, and they got 180 done in a week. Uh, right now you can go in there and you just open up the article that should have the question in the title, and you can use the Clarify AI and just hit record, and it's pretty amazing. I use it all the time. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that, reach out to us, and we're happy to talk to you about it.
Awesome. And then Tony had a great question. He said, so how does a company become ready with relevant data information?
Best thing you can do is do a find and follow workshop. So the find and follow workshop will help you identify what we call inputs, and we got some other great webinars on this. But inputs are, what are the questions people are getting asked? What are the tasks they have to perform? What are the problems they have to solve? And as you get all those inputs in that workshop, you'll then be able to do a gap analysis. And we do this for companies as well. We'll take them through the workshop, or you can learn how to do it in the book, or we've got some webinars on it. But you do this gap analysis of, okay, when people have this question, where do they go for the answer? Are they going to Susan? Well, if they're going to Susan, AI is not going to be able to use it. Do they have a trusted guide they can go to? That can come in to AI. So that workshop really helps you get a clearer idea of where you're at and how much work you have to do before you're going to be ready for one of these systems. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming on here. Hopefully this has been helpful and give you some good ideas on how to approach this brave new world of AI.